Hi. Oh my gosh, that was so
Right?
smooth. I love it. I love this. I love when technology is on our side.
Telling you.
Yes. Okay, this is going to be a good conversation. Whew, okay. Let's do it. Hi, everyone. I'm Tony Wilson, Director of Culture and Narrative Shift at Girls for Gender Equity. Thank you, Fiona. Thank you, Shanila, for joining us this afternoon. I was going to say this morning. A little bit about GGE really quickly, and then I would love for Fiona and both Shanila for y'all to introduce yourselves, and then we can get into the good stuff. GGE, short for Girls for Gender Equity, is a Brooklyn-based intergenerational organization leading racial and gender equity work and justice work using policy, culture shift, organizing to center the lives of cis and trans Black girls, gender expansive young people, and to make sure that they can live self-determined lives, because that is super important to us. So thank you for joining us today. We're happy to have you as part of our In My Black Feminist Bag series. I'll talk a little bit about the purpose of this series, but we'll love to get y'all's voices into the space.
Thank you for having us. When you reached out and we had our initial conversation, just your energy, I was like, yeah, I love these people. I love the intention. I love what you all are doing. It is so needed. It's so necessary. So like I said, I cannot just express enough how happy I am to be here today.
Yeah, thank you for saying yes to us. And I'm an avid follower of your page. So when I reached out and you said yes, I was like, whoo, I got one. I felt very excited. So talk to us, Shanila. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. I'm Shanila. I work for GGE and I'm a high school student.
Amazing. Well, we are happy to have you. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us.
Thank you.
We know the kids are too, okay? The kids are working. So let's get into this good conversation. To kick off In My Black Feminist Bag series today, our conversation for folks who are new to the series, we launched this series as a way for us to kind of bridge a gap between young people and academic language in the work that we do at GGE. We feel like it's really important as Black feminism, womanism being the foundation of the work that we do, for us to be able to talk with young people about how this shows up in their day-to-day lives, and also get into spaces of creators like yourself, Fiona, and how this shows up in your work. So let's get into the good stuff. How are you both celebrating Black Futures Month? How did you support or celebrate Black Futures Month? We're now in March. And how do you plan to celebrate Women's Herstory Month?
Shanila, would you like to go first or would you like me to go first?
I think I'll be mostly spending this month celebrating by, I think, just spreading general awareness within my friend groups about Women's Herstory Month.
Amazing. How I'm celebrating is trying to teach myself how to rest. The more I start to understand her story, and understanding like my mother, my grandmothers, my aunties, and all the women around us, we don't know how to rest. So I'm trying to teach myself how to do that. I am not being very successful. I'm trying not to be hard on myself for not being successful trying to rest. So I think it's just about, and just also just shouting out like my female friends in terms of just how amazing they are, and taking the time to shout them out and to talk about these stories. And I think I never thought of myself as a feminist until I started to look at my work, and I realized, wait, hold on a minute, you big it up, woman, hair that everywhere, yeah. Like you are. It wasn't something I thought of doing. It's something that came naturally to me. So I think I celebrate this topic, this movement every day. It's because it's something I'm passionate about.
Yeah, I relate to two things you just talked about. One, about the rest. The rest is so important. I just got back from Trinidad. I went for Carnival, and people call me, but I'm like, it's like a 40-mile like sprint. Okay, it's not vacation. However, that does remind me often that We do need time for rest. It's so important for us to have time to like recharge as Black women, Black femmes. We do everything, we do it all. And it's also impossible for us to do it all. So it's very important for us to center rest. And then the other part you just shared, where it just comes natural in your work. I relate to that so much. Like growing up, my brother would like jokingly call me a feminist when I was like 13, just because it felt like it was just like such a natural thing for me to center girls and center women, because I was like, this is who I am, right? So why not? So thank you for pointing that out. So Fiona, for folks who are joining us who may have never heard of you or don't know you, what you do, who is Fiona? What is Know Your Caribbean? And what should cis and trans Black girls who are watching know about you and your work?
Okay, so my name is Fiona Compton. I am a St. Lucian-born, London-based artist, filmmaker, and historian. And I became a historian through my art because I went to art school and did all of that kind of business. And when I was in art school, which is a great school, I couldn't find myself. I couldn't find my stories. I felt like the Caribbean and this our diaspora was very diminished, and was put in this very, very, very small box. And I left that degree course very frustrated. And I said, I am going to put my people in my work. If other people not doing it, well, I have to do it. And then through that, I started to study more about our history, and I felt cheated. I said, wow, I grew up in the Caribbean, and I still didn't know so much about my own region. I didn't know enough about people from Nevis or my Jamaican posse or people in Trinidad. I didn't know enough about Grenada. I didn't know enough about, the Spanish-speaking Caribbean, who are also my family from Puerto Rico and Cuba. I didn't know enough. And I felt like it was, my father always said that we are not divided by the Caribbean Sea, we are connected by it. And I move with that mantra in my work. And I think it's just about, I move with the frustration of me walking out of that university and thinking, screw you people, y'all are not here for me.
Right.
I want to I want to create this society, and this is what Know Your Caribbean is. And I love what you're saying about moving out of the academic language when we're speaking about certain things, history, culture, society issues, politics, all of these things. We don't need to speak in a very formal language which creates a barrier. It's not that our community doesn't care. When I see how Know Your Caribbean has grown, it's not that people don't care about history or social issues. They do, but it's finding the way to bridge that gap, to encourage communication, and conversation amongst different community groups. And that's what Know Your Caribbean does.
Yeah, and I think you do it in such an amazing way. And it's all about connection. Even like thinking about the reason why we're doing this series, and a lot of what you just said is that, especially with young people, and just all of us, really, we know what we're experiencing, right? And we might not have the language to name it or call it what it is or what we have experienced, but we feel it. And it's a part of our innate being, whether it is through trauma or through connection or whatever have you. I think it's important that for us to remove the academic barriers that a lot of our people have faced and are still facing, and be able to connect on a more personal level. And I think that's a lot of what you do with your work as well. Like whenever I read your posts, whenever I watch your videos, they don't feel like just history. It feels like very personal for me. And thank you. I also wanted to name, when we talk about Herstory and our culture and the work, something like someone asked me a question, I think yesterday, and I was like, I guess like my journey of history, or like my journey with Black history specifically, I should say. And being born to Jamaican immigrant parents, and being in America, there was always just a few things you learned in school, right? Specifically about Black history, right? It was like either enslavement, and then straight from enslavement to Jim Crow, civil rights, and then boom, it was like we were just here, right? So I remember even growing up feeling like that is not all of it. Like I'm sure there's a ton of things missing, and of course it was. And also feeling that I didn't learn specifically even about Jamaican history until I got to college, and I started, taking my own allegiances to learn more, right? And like reading the books and watching the documentaries and things like that. So I do think it's this really struggle of us having to like dig deep and just like go find things that people are not trying to like have us know, right? So to that extent, what inspired you? I know you just talked about the ways that the system, or like we're not trying to talk about your history specifically, but speaking about that experience, what else has inspired you to further your, I guess, your career in being a historian? And how does being a historian inform your feminism?
Ooh, big question. The last one especially, and a great question. But I can definitely answer that one. One of the tipping points for me was the earthquake in Haiti in 2010. And one night, because you find out that, all of these thousands upon thousands of people had died in this earthquake, and I had listened to this pirate radio station, and it was a Caribbean pirate radio station, and somebody called in and they said, oh, it's because all of these Haitians worship voodoo. This is why this thing has happened to them. And that made me really mad, because I felt like this kind of very colonial perspective took precedence over the loss of Black life, and that we were blaming that this nation of people who connected to their African heritage, and this is the reason why hundreds of thousands of people died, especially children. And that really bothered me. And then I read this amazing essay by Hilary Beckles, who's a great Bajan historian, and you can find his work online. He has loads of books, but he wrote this essay explaining about the history of Haiti and how, because like as you mentioned slavery, right? And then we've seen all of these films, and then we're like, yo, if it was me, I'd have go back in time. I would have killed Massa. I would have do this. I would have done this. We all have this fantasy.
I'm sure about what we
right? Exactly. And then, but Haiti did it. Haiti did the very thing that we have all been dreaming of doing. And then they were vilified, they were impoverished, they were cornered, they were bullied by the US, they were bullied by France, they were bullied by all of these other external Western countries, and impoverished. So therefore, the earthquake that happened, the infrastructure was so weakened by this debt that they had to pay, because when they decided we're going to be free, and they expelled all of the slave owners and all of the Europeans were like, you want your freedom, we're going to have to pay. And wants to do that. So understanding that this Black nation is such a source of empowerment, and how could I not know? Me, growing up in the Caribbean, I didn't even know that properly. I felt ashamed, I felt cheated. And so that is something that really inspires, like, what else do I not know? And to answer your question about Black feminism, it's understanding that the history of how Black women have been in the epicenter of shaping our societies, because we are the real hustlers. Okay. Like the women I'm telling you, the woman on the side of the road who's selling mango, who's selling her coconut drops, who's selling her tamarind balls. Okay, how many female managers do we know? Women managers. We know so many women who are in the center of shaping our Caribbean society. You don't find, women who are not doing something, whilst on top of being mothers and wives and partners and aunties and this and that. Our grannies shape our society so much. Without our grandmothers, how could our society cope? So seeing all of these things, and also finding, for me as a historian, finding those acts of resistance, especially by Black women, and seeing like how they've done some badass things. Like, for one, we don't get to see women in the forefront of acts of resistance, especially in civil rights resistance. The one woman most people can think of is maybe Rosa Parks, Nanny of the Maroons, here and there sometimes, of the Jamaican history, but you don't get to hear about women. And there are so many women. That's one of the things that drives me as well, to understand that our legacy of our history of slavery doesn't come with shame. It's actually very, very, very powerful. And that's what drives me.
Yes, thank you. That was so beautifully said. I really love what you shared. And it reminded me of a course I took in college, like a Caribbean history course. And the professor, I remember her saying that for a lot of Caribbean women, the organizing and the fight for justice always starts in the home. And then moves into the outer sphere, right? And even just thinking about the ways that we're not paid, or like for our labor, right? That's not just when we clock into work, and how that keeps the world turning literally every day. But I'm gonna pass the mic over to you, Shanila, for the next question, because I want to hear you and what your thoughts are.
Well, I know you guys mentioned being Caribbean, right? So Fiona, how might being Caribbean affect your views and your understandings about Black feminism?
Well, when we were advertising this live, and I wanted to put something together to spread the message, and I was thinking, what should I say? What should I talk about? And then I wanted to look at some of the disparities that happen in the Caribbean, and looking at, because people don't think in the Caribbean that women are paid less than men. People don't think in the Caribbean that women have to deal with having to do extra unpaid labor. Mm-hmm. And even in terms of things like sexual harassment, because we're very liberal, seen as very liberal, right? And then looking at just how women have been having to deal with this. But yet, you'd find Caribbean women are the most vibrant. We laugh loud, we talk loud, we dress loud, we cook loud. We are, we are extremely joyful. So even though looking at those stats were very difficult, those type of stats really made me feel even more empowered. Like, wow, we have been and still are going through all of this, and still we are the light of the community. We are the glue of the community. And those type of things shape me, because it inspires me to know that even going through all of this hardship, we're still here, and we do it very loud and bashy. And the question, when you ask me, what is in my Black feminist bag, I will show you all in a minute, but then you see what I mean. How these people have these women have literally shaped my perspective.
Yes, that is so beautiful. Yes, thank you for that. So thinking about your specific Black feminist bag, and we talked earlier about rest and what radical rest looks like specifically for Black women, for Caribbean women. What does actively practicing preservation of your Black women's identities and autonomy look like in your work? So I know a lot of the work that you share, you do history maybe centering like dance hall queens and things like that, right? So what does it look like for you to practice self-preservation and also center autonomy?
So yesterday I had to deliver a workshop in totally white space about power and privilege, and specifically white privilege. And one of the things that we were speaking about is a Black woman's place in a workspace, and into how so many Black women feel forced to straighten their hair. We're not even talking about your Black voice and your work voice. We all have different personalities in different spaces, but just how specifically, for example, how I always say, like, a Black woman, we are the only sector of society made to feel that what grows out of our head is ugly. And this is a very important thing, and considering that our hair is a main identifier of femininity and our identity, and how we are made to be told what to do with our hair. By every sector of society, everybody telling a Black woman what she should and should not do with her hair, whether you should wear weave or not, go natural or not, if it's long or not, if it's too nappy, if you have good hair, all of these things. And understanding of having to walk in a space with your head held high, with whatever version of hair you want, whether you have your lace front or you have your afro, your locks, or whatever. And I think that is something that we don't put enough love into, giving love to our hair. I know there has been loads of movements, but it is something that's very important to me. And I think also in terms of the preservation is having to walk in spaces where you are not comfortable. So for example, with my history stuff, I have to go to lots of museums and institutions and stuff that where the only Black people you see there are the security guards. And with my head held in a certain way that I am deserving of being in this space as much as anybody else, and not to diminish myself. And I think that there is preservation by not diminishing yourself. So whether you're a historian, whether you're a dancer, whether you're an accountant, whatever profession you're in, the only way you can preserve that is by not diminishing yourself. And I feel that Black women, Black femmes, have always been taught to talk small, dress small, be small, make yourself small, and we need to stop doing that.
Yes. Oh, that was a word. Even from the hair, and I know that is something that is so important, even to the young people that we work with in Shanila. Please speak to this. But we have young people here, specifically in New York City, which is a predominant group of young people that we work with, who are always getting attacked and discriminated, both racial and gender-based, in schools, right? Based on how their hair grows out of their head. And you know, for a young person, you're spending most of your day in school. This is the place where you're supposed to be cultivating experiences, learning, being social, building relationships. But instead of being able to do that, and instead of being able to be free, you're concerned about all day about is my hair in the way? Like, am I going to get in trouble today? Is my hair too bright? Are my shorts too short? Just thinking about all the ways that from the beginning, the systems are just set up flourish for young people to not flourish specifically. And even at GGE, a lot of our policy work, right, is centered in racial and gender bias that young people face, specifically Black girls. And one of the policies that we do sponsor and support is the Crown Act, which maybe folks are familiar with, which bans discrimination. It's a federal bill that bans discrimination
I've lost the audio. I'm not hearing you. Is it just me?
No, I'm also not hearing you.
Yeah. Just for like 10 seconds. But you're back now. Yeah.
So should I repeat the last part
Yeah.
or? Okay, so I don't know. I said something about the Crown Act, which I feel like folks.
Yes, you got that one.
I'd love to pass it back to you, Shanila, to talk about these specific experience that young people like you are experiencing in schools around these type of biases, and or also to just jump into another question.
Definitely, like I resonate with what you were saying throughout the day, you know, in a place that's supposed to be focusing mostly on cultivating your knowledge and educating yourself. You're really focused on a lot of these things. But Fiona, looking at your work, I noticed that you like to highlight women, Black women and our ancestors who were disruptors to colonial rulings and spaces. And I mean, I love that. But what are some ways that you, as a Black woman and artist, continue to disrupt those spaces?
By all kinds of things. Like, for one, I do not change how I speak when I go into spaces. So, for example, I've been living in the UK for 20 plus years now. People say, how come you don't have a British accent? But I'm like, but I'm speaking English.
Confident.
I'm speaking English, so I don't think I do. Yes, I may speak a little bit more clearly in terms of, because I know, for example, if I'm talking to solutions, I use certain slangs or whatever, but I will not change my accent because I speak English and people can understand me. So I would just to add to that, I just don't diminish myself. I did that for a very long time. I did that where I would shrink myself in certain spaces so that I would not be offensive, that I would not dress in bright colors, I wouldn't have my hair in this bright red, and just not just to blend in, but to not be seen at all. And I stopped all of that. And I think that's the thing, is just holding your head up high. This is a way that you step into yourself. Now, I'm 41, right? And I know you in high school, you have a long way to go. And one thing I will say, because I've been thinking about these questions, is that every day you learn something new about yourself. It takes a while to love yourself, and it's okay if sometimes you don't. That's part of the journey, because when you do fall in love with yourself, it feels amazing. There's certain times that you will doubt yourself. That is all part of the journey. And then, you know, sometimes you go through a renaissance where you're like, yes, I am feeling myself. I am it. And then you'll have something that's going to knock you. But the thing is there is rebellion and resistance in walking into very white spaces, of which there are many, and doing so unapologetically. If you want to wear all your colors, have your hair out, speak however you want to speak, because it's about owning yourself. And bit by bit, step by step, you will get there to a point that all of these other opinions will become irrelevant. And it takes time, but when you get there, it feels real good.
Thank you. I want to highlight a lot of what you just shared about code switching, right? I think that is so for us to talk about. It's something jokingly that my brother gets on my mom about. My mom has been in America for probably 30 something years. And if you speak to her, she sounds like she got here yesterday, right? Like you would have never thought this woman has been here this long, because she just refuses. She refuses to adapt to quote unquote, you know, how talking proper, or what people feel like she should talk like. But my brother, who was actually also born in Jamaica, who moved to America when he was 8, he's always getting on her about that. He's like, "Mommy, talk proper now, just talk proper now." Like, them can't understand me, them know what me I said, right? So she's like she's rebelling against it. But I also think, like, me, I'm totally fine with it. I'm like, no problem being like the language, you know, person in the space when she needs it, for people who are trying to disrespect her, of course, based on how she talks, which happens all the time. But I think with my brother, because when he came to America and he was teased based on how he spoke, I think for him, it just resonates a little bit differently, where he's like, no, I don't want you to be looked at that way. I don't want people to make fun of you, right? So I want you to talk or learn how to talk how I learned how to talk, right? So I think there's always those dual experiences happening, where one person is pushing back, but there's another person who's like, but no, like, please do it this way, right? And it often comes from trauma, or not wanting to be traumatized, not wanting to experience that. So there's always those two balances. So thank you for highlighting that. It's so important. Speaking of Carnival, I know I mentioned it earlier.
And I was saying,
what'd you say?
I said, no, it.
It was amazing. I got like some bruises and all the battle scars.
The skin is glowing.
Huh?
I said the skin is glowing.
Thank you. Is tanning. I feel very blessed. But I would love to talk briefly about Caribbean Carnival with you, to familiarize the people on its importance. I feel like every day on social media, Carnival is becoming more and more popular, I think. And I don't want to say trendy, but it's, you know, of course, like moving past just like Caribbean spaces and into more like mainstream American European spaces. And I see things about Carnival that are just so sideways all the time. Even yesterday I saw a post that said, oh, what are y'all doing for, what are all y'all paying for? Like, y'all are just paying to like have sex with each other and walk around all day in scantily clad costumes. And it's just like, please, no one's like, what? Where'd you get that from? So I would love to talk with you about, how do you talk about Carnival specifically when we think about creating space, agency, autonomy for Black girls, right? Because Carnival is definitely a space for bodily liberation. And then what are the points that you would share about Carnival for folks who have no idea what it is?
Yeah, I think to start off about, like, to introduce people to Carnival for those who have never experienced, is that Carnival is an immersive experience, and it's something that it's as experience, is experiential. You have to be in it, because looking at it from the outside, it could be misperceived very easily, and especially if you're just looking at a few posts on social media. It's like having a spiritual experience, and how can you really like emulate a spiritual experience on social media? You can't. So I think the thing is, people don't realize Carnival is community. Yes, you see with anything else social media, we know that sex sells. So anything that's sexy is going to reach the top of the timelines. So you're going to see a certain type of imagery that's going to be put up on social media that's going to be focused on. And you know, that's not the primary element, or that's not the thing that shapes Carnival. What shapes Carnival is community. So when I go to Carnival, I will see friends that I haven't seen for the whole year, and we will hug and dance together and sing. And it's not necessarily all of the hypersexualized dancing that you're seeing, right? But it's like, it's family, it's people singing songs together in unison in the streets. And the thing is, we are taking over the streets and we are taking up space to say that I am here and going to be singing and dancing and expressing this form of freedom, a freedom that my ancestors did not have. And you know, our ancestors gave us Carnival. It's not just a thing we created for social media to dance around and look like we had, and to like mimic sex. No, it's something that our ancestors created and gave to us. It is centuries of culture where in which before, during the era of enslavement, where enslaved people were not allowed to sing, to dance, our dances were called heathenish and vulgar, and our drums were banned, and they took to the streets and they did it anyway. So when you're talking about Black Lives Matter marches, this is, to me, the longest running Black Lives Matter march in history, because we have been taken to the streets chanting. There's a lot of the songs, calypso songs that developed into soca and whatever, came from these songs that were created to chant and ridicule the white governors and the white aristocracy. And we did so unapologetically. And then you see videos of people covering themselves with black oil. It's to make myself the blackest version of my blackness. You say I'm black, well, I'm going to be that. So that is what Carnival is. Then you can add all the frivolity, you know, the things that you see with the feathers and stuff. This is influence from Brazilian carnivals, which is, well, I should know, let me be clear, Rio Carnival, because Carnival in Bahia is a completely different experience. So Rio Carnival has a very different aesthetic that has now influenced a lot of the Caribbean Carnival that you see. But that's not the foundation of it. Most people, when they finish Carnival, right? I know, Tony, you loved your costume and you felt beautiful in it. But I know when you came back from Carnival, you didn't think, man, my costume was great. You thought that being with my friends was great. Dancing on the road and loving my body as it is felt great. Singing, closing my eyes, opening my arms and singing felt great. It wasn't thinking about like, looked in your costume. It was about the experience. And that's what, you know, if anyone who's a critique of Carnival, I would say, come and join it. And you'll feel very differently about it. So, you know, in terms of, that is what I would say. And in terms of creating space for women in Carnival, it is very important because there's a part of Carnival called Jouvet, right? So Jouvet is the thing where you see the paint and the powder oil. It's not a costume. And people, you wear an old t-shirt and an old pair of shorts and whatever. You have your hair in a wrap up in a stocking bag or whatever. And this is one of the spaces where a lot of women feel safe, because a lot of women want to take to the streets and sing and dance and whine and be sensual and be sexual and do that. But they don't have the confidence to do that, maybe in a Carnival costume. But Jouvet is as important part of Carnival as is the pretty feathers. And this is where a lot of women feel safe, because they have this anonymity, or everyone looks the same. Everyone is covered in all the soot and dirt and paint and whatever. And there is that anonymity where they grant freedom of space. So that's one way Carnival and Jouvet creates a space for women. Secondly, the costumes. At the end of the day, please do not, for those who may see, all of the models and certain body types that tend to go viral, that's not real Carnival. That's maybe like 5%.
At all.
Exactly. That's 5% of what you see on the road. You're seeing all body types and you're seeing all ages. I know women in their 60s who put on a Carnival costume every day. Okay? I played mass in Carnival. I was 8 months pregnant. I didn't have no hot girl body. But you know, it's about the freedom of celebrating every body type. And I remember last year we had come across a very beautiful woman walking down the street in her Carnival costume. And we asked her, what is your favorite part of your Carnival costume? And she said, my skin. not the feathers or the gems or whatever. She said my skin. And that always stuck with me in terms of celebrating every single body type and having, whenever do you ever get a chance to take over a street and for you to just sing and dance. That's it. You don't get those opportunities nowhere else other than Carnival. And it is, as someone has said, a freedom of space and taking up space and doing so joyfully whilst protesting against all of the colonial laws and the colonial history. So there is protest and power and joy. So that's what Carnival is.
Yes. Ooh, you took the words from my mind and my heart and just melted it into this live conversation. Thank you. When you were talking about Juve specifically, there's a reason why, for me at least, Dirty Mass is my favorite. Like I love it way more than Pretty Mass. Or folks who are watching Pretty Mass, you know, the costume, the feathers, the backpack. When I'm done, like after I cross the stage for carnivals or whatever have you, midday, I'm taking the backpack off. I'm giving it to a girl in the street because I can't anymore. I'm like, I'm done with it. Somebody else, please have it. So when I think about Juve and what that means and how you've perfectly described it, I think it's where I feel my most liberated and free. I think as specifically as Black women moving throughout the world, you always feel like you have to present a specific look or like be put together or like look your best, or folks won't take you seriously, they won't listen to you, and you'll be treated any kind of way. But I feel like at Juve, like you said, we're all looking the same. We all have on like old shirts, old bikinis, like our heads are wrapped, and it's a sense of rebellion that you don't even know that you need until you're in the moment and you're like, I feel like your heart is like breaking open. I don't know how other way to describe it. And just in general, with Carnival, we're talking about like body types and Black women and Black girls being safe and feeling seen, even like queer folks being safe and feeling seen. I was in Trinidad and I was telling my friend, I was like, I love that queer folks are like in abundance now at Carnival. I think before, the culture unfortunately was like to be like heard and not seen. Like they were making the costumes, they were doing the section leaders, they were like doing the makeup, but you wouldn't like see them on the road, right? Like they would be there, but they weren't like visible, if that makes sense. Versus now, like it's so much visibility. Even in like Trinidad, I think on one of the cover of their papers, it was like two women who were celebrating Carnival together. I believe a couple, they were like kissing on the front cover. I was like, this is like so beautiful to witness, even the growth within our own communities, and how we have allowed space for Carnival to be healing and to be what it is and what it was meant to be. So thank you for sharing that. It's so important. Shanila, I want to ask you specifically, what are the ways that you stay connected? I know you're also Caribbean. We talked briefly about this before, but what are the ways that you stay connected to your Caribbean roots, and how does that inform you as a Black girl?
My Caribbean roots, I stay connected to them through like conversations with family. I make sure that every year I go visit all my family members, go to take a yearly vacation to Jamaica, gotta talk with them, converse, you know. Definitely stories and like just tales that my older family members tell me. That's always been like my favorite part of that. But yeah, conversation.
Nice. That is so important. Especially I think of us as like Black folks, how our history isn't documented on paper often, how a lot of it is told through storytelling, and how we keep those stories and the history alive. So thank you, Shanila. We're gonna move into, I feel like, my favorite question that I'm gonna ask both of you. What do you include in your Black feminist bag? This could be a literal thing, a figurative thing. What's in your Black feminist bag? I want to know.
Who's going first?
I don't know. Y'all gotta decide.
I don't know.
I'll go first. So I was thinking about it, and I was thinking about it, and I was thinking about it. I say, what's in my Black feminist bag? And it's a literal thing with a figurative meaning. Okay, so what's in my Black Feminist bag is gold battery riders.
Yes.
So the reason,
I love that.
was back riders, pum pum shorts, whatever you want to call them. So you can, I'm showing you in full. That's the front. That's the back. Yeah, with all the ruffles and things. So the reason why I chose that is because dancehall queens have shaped my life. I grew up on Patra and Lady Saw and Tanya Stevens, and seeing like their music videos where, for example, with Patra has a song called Romantic Call, and the first thing she says is, "My property is my property."
Mm-hmm.
And then it opens with this hard dancehall rhythm, right? And it's just like she is so powerful. She's confrontational, but she's also very feminine and strong. And I was like, yo, who is this woman? And I wanted to be Patra. And looking at how dancehall queens, looking at when we look at from Murder She Wrote, we're looking at dancehall queen Carlene and the film Dancehall Queen, and seeing how women in dancehall, especially in the 90s, if you about 90s dancehall in particular, is when you look at women in dancehall and the dancehall queens, you'd come to see them perform. You couldn't come and whine on them, you were not bending them down and putting their head down to the ground. Like, their, first of all, outfits, wig,
Salon.
thing,
Just
custom made. Like, it wasn't, they didn't just go in a shop and buy something. They had something custom made by a local seamstress. So we're looking at not even a local seamstress, I should say it was made by Jamaican designers. So they wore, unique Jamaican made designer pieces, because I'm sorry, the local seamstresses that we have, our community seamstresses, are actually designers, because for one, they design, and you can ask them to make anything and they'll make it, and they'll add the extra sauce and season on top of it, right? And these men would walk into those spaces, and who could talk to them? Who could touch them? Nobody. And they would tap into their sensuality, their sexuality. They do it so unapologetically. When people would say they'd see videos of Rihanna like touching a pum pum and all that, be like, oh my God. I'm like, yeah, but I grew up on that. I grew up on dancehall queens doing that. And, so yes, I carry my gold pum pum shorts because I want to emulate that confidence that's very specifically Caribbean centered female confidence, in terms of just being loud, proud, sensual, sexual, strong, and just all encompassing what a Caribbean woman is. And I think there's no version of womanhood anywhere else in the world like dancehall queens. And that is why I have the gold battery riders in my hand.
I love it so much. When you took them out, I was like, oh, it's giving show and tell, and I'm here for it. And the gold, my favorite color, it's just
Right?
perfect. So thank you. And I always say, sometimes I ruffle some feathers when I say this, but I feel like you got to give credit where credit is due. I often say that the queens of the dance hall were specifically important in paving the way for the blueprint of what we know as women in hip hop.
Yep.
So when I think of Foxy Brown, I think of them like the blueprint they received came from dance hall. Like, you can't tell me otherwise. You can't tell me different. I love them all the same, right? Because I think they all are specifically important in shaping who I am as a millennial Black girl. But I can't have one without the other. And I think one specifically definitely birthed the other for sure. Shanila, what is in your bag? I'm excited to know.
In my bag, I would definitely have lots of compliments to just give out, because women are so great. They're so amazing, and Black women in general, we're often like put down. We're like minuscule, like just shrunk. And I think it's important to uplift and empower each other to just take up space and like love each other's energies, because we're just amazing. Yeah.
Isn't that beautiful? Like, yo, I love that so much. Like, I feel almost overwhelmed by what you said. I thought it was so so pure and just so beautiful, and it wasn't hidden, and again, like, just so giving, because it wasn't even about yourself, it was about you giving to other women. I thought that was so beautiful. Like, I am going to take I've learned so much from what you just said, and I'm going to put that in my bag too. That was just so, like, my heart is full.
Yeah, we all need affirmation, specifically Black girls, I think, as Daniela just said, are always deserving of affirmations, especially in a world that is not trying to affirm you all the time. We have young people, especially at GGE, who created an affirmation kit, a box of these dope affirmation cards. Daniela's like nodding her head.
Yeah.
And I think it is so powerful the way that young people will always lead and show you what you need to do and how you need to do it. We just got to listen to them. So thank you, Shanila, for reminding us to love on ourselves. I would love to move us into the Q&A since we're a little pressed for time. It's almost 1. I don't know where time goes, but I'm going to try to get through some of the questions. We have a few. So I'll start with, this question says, Fiona, you mentioned how there are so many important women we don't know about. Who are some Black Caribbean women and femmes we should know and uplift?
Well, okay, to keep it short, since I know we pressed for time, is I have a hashtag that you can check out on Instagram. It's called Chronicles of the Caribbean Bad Gyal. So it's GYAL, and that is anything that I've shared that concerns amazing women. I put that hashtag so you can find like a whole catalog of amazing women that way.
Let's repeat the hashtag for folks who are viewing one more time.
It is Chronicles of the Caribbean Bad Gyal. That's the hashtag.
Y'all heard it. Hope you wrote it down, saved it in your notes, because I'm also going to check it out. There's a question for you, Shanila. As a young Black Caribbean person, how does Fiona's work and her answers today impact you? What does it mean to you to have conversations like this?
Fiona's work definitely has a huge impact on me. I mean, looking at her page, I'm just so like empowered, like I'm inspired, seeing Caribbean heritage and like how beautiful it is when it's not often portrayed as that is really empowering.
Thank you. Yeah, +1 to how it is not often portrayed that way, which always boggles my mind, because when I think about where my family is from, where I'm from, I'm like, it does not get any more historically richer than this, but touche. There's 2 more questions here. I'm going to move through them. So we have, what are your dreams and visions for a liberated future, and how do you bring joy into the work to get there? And I've assumed that's maybe for both folks.
Okay. Shanila, you want to go first?
Sure. Could you repeat the question?
Absolutely. So this person would like to know, what are your dreams and visions for a liberated future, and how do you bring joy into your work to get there?
Well, personally, I would like to go into the field of psychology. I just think it's really like it's a really nice field. Bringing joy into those spaces, I definitely say like inspiring people, definitely more people of color to, you know, connect and like interact with that field, because it's often like put down or minuscule or like not talked about as often. I definitely think like putting positive connotations on those conversations is important.
Man, I wish like I could go back in time so that you could be like someone to guide me, because like you're so positive. And I love things. I look at myself in high school in terms of, we didn't have these types of conversations about like uplifting each other and things like that. And for someone to say that one of their goals is to just compliment people more, and especially our women more, I think that's so important, but also rare. that someone, you know, is thinking about others in every step of their way. Because even in what you said about bringing joy, and your joy is helping others. I just really want to say thank you for being this way. um, but yeah, to answer, I think that the joy, I think, is just following what makes you happy. And I think the older you get, you start to understand that more. You just start to know what you like and what you don't like. Like it's circles become smaller, and your focus becomes just tighter, and then you start to understand what really makes you happy. But I like to, just because the history can be really tough, I like to just add my own sauce and seasoning on things. I don't like to follow anyone else's recipe. A lot of people have told me how I should run New York Caribbean, how I should tell stories. People say, "Oh, Fiona, you need to speak more formal. Fiona, you can't use the term bad girl because it has negative connotations. Fiona, you cannot put the cutlass because it's violent." And I'm like, no, it's not. That's not my intention. And I will be very, I become very clear on my intention. And I think some of the things that make us unhappiest is because we're not moving in our intentions. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, like when you go to a restaurant and it's like, that's not really the food you really want to eat, but people tell you, oh, you should go and eat there, and you go eat there, and you end up
Yeah.
liking it. It's the same thing. You have to follow understanding your intention and just following your heart and sticking to that, and it will only manifest in good things.
Mm-hmm. And I would also just add too that there's also so much power in reclaiming those terms that we're taught is bad, or that we're taught that we're not supposed to want to be or associate with. So I love to call myself a bad gal. I love it so much. It like gives me extra pep in my step. So thank you for standing firm in that. We have three more questions. Gonna try to get through them. So someone asked, Fiona, when is the Caribbean coloring book coming back?
It's in the works, man. We trying to not trying, we are doing. We're gonna be launching it in the next couple of months. It's just we're working on finding the right supplier because the book is quite weighty and we're using like special quality paper. We don't want to just print it with just any printer, and we have to make it as cost effective as possible. So we're just fine tuning those things, because the book was made not to be thrown away, but for you to make art at home. So we want to make sure we use like the best materials. So it's coming back soon.
Love it. I can't wait to purchase. Exciting. And then last two questions. So someone says, Tony mentioned that Carnival is one of the spaces she feels most liberated and free. Shanila and Fiona, what are some of those spaces and places for you? So where do you feel liberated and free?
I definitely say I feel liberated and free in school, as surprising as that sounds, because, it's not often a place that we can feel liberated and free, but definitely taking up space in those spaces that like try to not make you feel important is good. And like, yeah, school.
I love that. Um, yeah, Carnival is definitely one of my places. I think because a friend of mine who's on the live, Johnny, he said it's you are also performing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think is you do end up becoming a piece of performance art and kind of stepping into that kind of you are parading. You're like, hey, look at me, I'm amazing. And I think that is also freeing as well. But I think that the place that makes me feel freest is when I'm at home in St. Lucia, actually, and sitting on the beach by myself, just to, because I think when I go to the sea and I sit down by the sea, I see the expanse of how big the ocean is, and it makes my problems feel very small, and it makes me feel very humble and also very grateful. And having those three emotions combined is very freeing. So that's what, yeah, the ocean, definitely the water, yeah, definitely that.
Those are both beautiful answers. Specifically, Shanila, I want to affirm your answer too, because I grew up also, of course, New York City, latchkey kid. My mom was working all kinds of hours. My brother was always playing basketball somewhere. And even though school stressed me out, I would always find like that one teacher or like just like one space I felt safe in school. And I would stay there until they kicked me out. Like I was in this, which is why I think is so important that we have to work to make schools like safe and equitable for young people like you to also keep feeling safe there. So thank you. I wanted to affirm that answer. And we have one more question, and I'll give you the floor, Fiona, to tell folks where they can follow you and keep up with your amazing work. Our final question is, can you guys help expand all of this to Canada? It is so, so needed. So I'm assuming the work that you're doing, Fiona, I'm not sure if they could be a little bit specific, but yes, expanding the work to Canada, or do you have plans to do work or collaborations there in the future?
You sure that's for me and not for you?
Um, I assume it's for, it could be for both of us. If it is for both of us, I will say on GGEs, and we do national and we're moving into international spaces and work. But right now, I think our focus is to tackle our national expansion of our Black girls freedom work. We have a Black Girl Bill of Rights that we are pushing on a national scale. We have a few bills on the policy end that we're supporting that are federal. And then we also have a national campaign. So we have young people all over the country that we work with as well. So right now we're really focused on national, but fingers crossed we get to move into international spaces very soon, because it is important that Black girls are living their best lives in every country that they thrive in.
Amazing. See, someone has already commented and said, I would love to help in Canada. So, you know, you're...
Okay, so for us, yes, let's stay connected.
I think, yeah, if for Know Your Caribbean, we're definitely going to be doing a lot more things in the US and Canada this year and moving forward, because our diaspora is wide, and, you know, the USA and Canada has a huge community and are some of the biggest supporters of the page. And so 100%, we are going to be doing a lot more outreach, both in the USA and Canada, especially from the latter half of this year. So we'll be there.
Nice. Amazing. I'm excited to be a part and join all that work. To that extent, Fiona, please plug your work, plug yourself. Where can we find you? What's coming up for you?
All kind of things. So one of the things with Know Your Caribbean is, so the page is called Know Your Caribbean. So we are the #1 platform in the world for Caribbean history and culture. But one of the things...
Something light. Let's get into it. Congratulations, Black woman. Okay. I love it.
But one of the things that we do is, yes, we do workshops and things like that in different spaces, and also we do things in corporate spaces. We've done quite a few of those things, but we want to do a lot more tangible things for the community. So one of the things that we will be doing in the next few months, we're just fine-tuning that, is we're going to be giving free therapy sessions to people in the diaspora who cannot access it. So one of the things is, for example, in the Caribbean, if you are from a very tightly knit community, finding a therapist who is anonymous, who may not have any bias, can be very difficult, because everyone kind of knows some semblance of every family, right? So how can these people access help where in spaces where they can't, because there's no anonymity? So we are going to be doing things like that. We are also working hard on pushing for the reparations debate, and pushing for that in terms of, everyone says, give us our 40 acres and a mule, run us our check. What does that mean? And doing this reparative justice in the Caribbean, we're going to be pushing very hard on that. These are some of the many topics that we're going to be tackling on the ground, not just online, but also working with governments and with policymakers to make things be like a real change. But especially, first point of call is working on a therapist. So if you are a Black therapist, Black or brown therapist, please get in touch. It's easy, knowyourcaribbean@gmail. Let's talk and see how we can do this outreach for people back home.
That is phenomenal work. Thank you. I
Mm.
want to really give you your flowers right now because a lot of the labor that we put into these spaces, these movements are not easy. We come to the work because it is us, because we are it. That's like something our founder at Gigi says all the time. And it's so true. So it can very much be taxing for us as much as it's rooted in love and fruitfulness for our communities. It can also be taxing. So really want to shine some light on you and all the work that you're doing. Thank you, thank you, thank you. As someone who has benefited from your page greatly, thank you for your time and for your effort and for all that you do. And Shanila, thank you so much, so much, so much today for being a part of this conversation. We cannot have these spaces without you. Thank you for bringing youth voice here, for centering your lived experience. That is so necessary for us to uplift every day and the way that you see the world. And again, thank you folks who are joining us on live, who stayed the whole hour, who popped in for like 5 minutes or 10 minutes. We appreciate your views, your time, your thoughts. And until next time, please join us next week for our next conversation with Fee, the MC, on March 9th at 12 p.m. Eastern. And until then, be well and enjoy your Women's Herstory Month, everyone. Bye, y'all. Thank you.
Thanks for having
Of
us.
course. Thank you.
Of course.
Bye soon. All right. Bye.
Great one, y'all.
Bye.